What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Wrestling Decoded. And today we're talking about a roster decision so calculated it almost feels like architecture more than wrestling booking. Because that's genuinely what this was. One writer looking at a brand new half-empty roster in 2002 and deciding deliberately which 6 specific wrestlers would become the load-bearing pillars holding the entire show up. And it worked so well that 2 decades later, people still call this the best stretch of weekly wrestling television WWE ever produced. So let's actually build this thing back up, piece by piece, and figure out exactly how the SmackDown Six came together and why it mattered so much for the careers involved. Let's get into it. If you're into these deep dives into how wrestling's best eras actually got built behind the scenes, that's exactly what this channel does. Go ahead and subscribe now before we start. Here's where the blueprint starts. In 2002, WWE split its roster in 2 for the first time, dividing talent between Raw and SmackDown. And on paper, in that first year especially, SmackDown didn't automatically look like the stronger show. Raw had Triple H at the center of the Evolution faction, and plenty of established star power to lean on. But the man running SmackDown's creative direction at the time, former ECW owner Paul Heyman, had a very specific vision for what he wanted the blue brand to actually become: a wrestling-heavy show built around genuine in-ring chemistry rather than just star power alone, something that could compete on substance even if it couldn't always compete on Ming recognition. His plan, in his own words, was to create 3 specific pairings as the show's cornerstones: Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, Chavo and Eddie Guerrero, and Rey Mysterio and Edge. As Heyman later explained it directly, the entire point was to give himself an excuse to feature these 6 in main events consistently and turn all of them into legitimate main event stars through sheer volume of great matches together, week after week, rather than waiting for one big moment to elevate any of them. But here's the part of this blueprint most fans don't actually know. Heyman had to trade away 2 genuinely valuable established pieces to make this vision happen. To get Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero moved over to SmackDown from Raw, Heyman reportedly had to send Chris Jericho and Christian's entire stable of talent over to Raw in exchange, specifically because Raw's head writer at the time, Brian Gewirtz, enjoyed working with that comedic style of material. It was a trade in the truest sense of the word, giving up 2 performers who were already over with audiences specifically to secure the 2 ring generals Heyman genuinely believed would elevate everyone else standing around them, betting on long-term chemistry over short-term star power. And Eddie Guerrero needed that elevation badly at this exact moment in his career. He'd left WWE, gone back to the independent circuit, worked on repairing his personal life away from the spotlight, and returned in April of 2002, essentially rebuilding his entire career from the ground up, almost from scratch. Reunited with his nephew Chavo, whom he'd previously tagged with back in WCW, the 2 formed Los Guerreros, built around a simple, unapologetic philosophy that fans immediately latched onto. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. It's one of the more purely entertaining tag team gimmicks WWE ever produced. And it worked because Eddie and Chavo backed up all the comedy with genuinely great lucha libre-informed tag team wrestling every single week, twice capturing the WWE Tag Team Championships in the process. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. How many wrestling companies today would actually trade away 2 over-talented, established performers just to build a stronger 6-man core, rather than simply stacking more names on top of what they already had? Then came the final piece that completed the blueprint. Rey Mysterio signed with the newly rebranded World Wrestling Entertainment in June of 2002, following a lengthy run in WCW where his character had mostly been confined to the cruiserweight scene, considered by many in that company too small to ever be positioned as a genuine top-level star. Nobody, by Heyman's own team's later admission, expected Mysterio to become as big a star as he eventually did. The initial plan was simply to have a great attraction on the roster, not necessarily a future world champion headlining pay-per-views. Mysterio made his SmackDown television debut on July 23, 2002, defeating Chavo Guerrero in a scintillating 6-minute match that immediately established he still possessed every bit of the world-class ability he'd shown throughout his WCW career. Just 1 week later, Benoit officially jumped over to SmackDown alongside Eddie, lured by then General Manager Stephanie McMahon's on-screen storyline. And with that single move, the full sextet was finally completely in place. What happened next is the part people actually remember most vividly to this day. For 22 of the following 23 weeks, SmackDown put at least one match on television, pitting a member of that six against another member of that same six. Not occasionally, not as a special attraction, nearly every single week for almost half a year straight. Los Guerreros feuded with Edge and Mysterio over the tag titles. Angle and Benoit clashed with both of the other teams repeatedly. All three original pairings scrambled into every possible combination against each other, and virtually all of it delivered genuinely great, memorable wrestling. It all peaked at Survivor Series 2002, when Los Guerreros defeated the team of Angle and Benoit alongside Edge and Mysterio in a triple threat tag match to finally capture the titles outright, a moment widely considered the true culmination of that tag team chapter of the larger story. And within those pairings, something happened that wasn't fully planned from the start. Angle and Benoit's on-screen partnership curdled naturally into genuine tension, and their eventual rivalry produced one of the finest matches in WWE history at the 2003 Royal Rumble. That singles feud alone elevated Benoit's entire career trajectory going forward, despite the two very real knocks against him at the time that Heyman's team openly acknowledged he was undersized, standing next to a roster of much larger men, and by his own reputation never had much natural charisma on the microphone compared to his peers. None of that ended up mattering once he actually got in the ring. He won the United States Championship in 2003, lost it to Guerrero shortly after, won the Royal Rumble outright in 2004, and outlasted both Shawn Michaels and Triple H at WrestleMania XX to become World Heavyweight Champion, the single peak achievement of his entire in-ring career. Quick pause here. Drop a comment on which pairing from this sextet you think actually produced the best matches together. Because personally, I think Angle and Benoit's original tag team chemistry gets overshadowed a bit by just how good their singles rivalry eventually became. Here's where Heyman's original blueprint truly pays off in full. Eddie Guerrero won the WWE Undisputed Championship at No Way Out 2004, a moment widely regarded, even by the writers who were actually in the room at the time, as the genuine pinnacle of Heyman's entire vision for this roster finally coming full circle. Edge later cashed in the very first ever Money in the Bank contract to win his own first world championship in 2006. And Rey Mysterio, the smallest member of the entire group, and the one nobody had initially expected to reach that level, climbed all the way to a world title of his own on the sport's biggest stage, WrestleMania. Out of the entire six, only Chavo Guerrero never captured a world championship or reached that same main event status, though even he built a genuinely respected career of his own, including a run with the ECW championship, and remains regarded to this day as one of the best in-ring technicians of his entire generation, regardless of the accolades missing from his resume. Ironically, Heyman himself didn't stick around long enough to watch this blueprint fully realized from his original position. He was removed as SmackDown's lead writer in February of 2003, just months after assembling the exact roster core that would go on to define the show for years afterward. The architect stepped away before the building was even fully finished, and the 6 pillars he'd carefully put in place just kept holding the entire show up without him standing there to see it happen. So here's the actual legacy sitting underneath all of this. It wasn't luck, and it wasn't simply 6 talented guys happening to land on the same roster by pure coincidence. It was one specific, deliberate decision to trade away established value in exchange for raw in-ring chemistry, betting that great wrestling delivered consistently week after week would build genuine stars faster than star power alone ever could manage on its own. And for one incredible sustained stretch of SmackDown television, that bet paid off almost completely. Which member of the SmackDown Six do you think benefited the most from that entire stretch of television? Let me know down in the comments. My money's personally on Eddie Guerrero, but I genuinely want to hear your case for someone else on this list. And if you want more of these deep dives into how wrestling's greatest eras actually got built behind the scenes, make sure you're subscribed to Wrestling Decoded. There's plenty more of this still to uncover.